In the bustling city of Los Angeles, not far from the glimmering lights and towering skyscrapers, there existed a hidden corner, a place often overlooked by the hurried masses. This corner, tucked away in a small, quiet shopping center, was where two souls found solace amidst the chaos. It was a chilly morning when we first meet Alex. A homeless man in his mid-40s with rough hands and a weathered face that bore the marks of a life filled with struggle. His clothes were worn thin, faded, and torn at the seams. Yet, despite everything, there was a certain dignity in the way he held himself. He sat against the brick wall near a small grocery store, his back propped up by a dirty cardboard sign that read, "Out of work. Help needed." By his side was Max, a scruffy mutt with a coat that had clearly seen better days. Max wasn't just a dog to Alex, he was a companion, a lifeline. Over the past few months, their bond had become unbreakable. When Alex's life had seemed at its lowest point, it was Max who had appeared at his side, quietly lying down next to him on a bitter night, offering warmth and comfort when no one else had. And from that moment on, they were inseparable. While the world rushed past, too busy to notice, Alex and Max shared their quiet little corner. People would occasionally glance at them, some with pity, others with indifference, but no one really stopped. No one reached out. For the most part, they were invisible. On this particular day, however, something was about to change. The distant rumble of a motorcycle engine grew louder, cutting through the stillness of the parking lot. The sound was deep and aggressive, like thunderstorm clouds gathering in the distance. Heads turned as the bike pulled into the lot, its engine still roaring as the rider dismounted. The man who got off was tall and imposing, wearing a weathered leather jacket and black boots that clicked sharply on the pavement. His demeanor was one of quiet menace, and he scanned the lot with a cold, calculating gaze. He took slow, deliberate steps, each one seemingly measured to instill discomfort in those nearby. When his eyes landed on Alex and Max, a sly grin spread across his face, as if he had found something that amused him. "Well, what do we have here?" The biker's voice was thick with disdain, and his words were directed at Alex and Max. "A bum and his mutt. Bet that dog's worth more than you." Alex didn't respond, his eyes cast downward, too used to the insults. He tightened his grip on the cardboard sign, trying to ignore the growing tension in the air. Max, sensing the threat, moved protectively in front of Alex, his ears back, his body tense. The biker leaned in closer, mocking the dog with a taunting voice. "What's the matter, dog? You gonna bite me? Protect your pathetic owner?" Alex's voice was quiet, almost desperate. "Please, just leave us alone." But the biker didn't stop. Instead, he grinned and took another step forward, his shadow falling over the homeless man and his dog. "You don't belong here," he sneered. "This is a parking lot, not a shelter for people like you." Max growled low, a sound that vibrated in the still air. The biker's grin widened, and with a sudden motion, he raised his foot, pretending to kick the dog. Alex's heart sank. "No, please, don't hurt him," he shouted, reaching out for Max as if he could somehow protect him. The biker's laughter filled the air, cruel and hollow. "You should teach your mutt to respect me," he said, his voice dripping with malice. It seemed like the situation was about to spiral into something much darker. But just as the tension in the parking lot was about to break, a deep, commanding voice cut through the air. "Enough." The words were firm, and they stopped everyone in their tracks. Even the biker froze, momentarily taken aback. The crowd around them began to murmur, their attention shifting toward the source of the voice. Emerging from between the rows of parked cars, A figure stepped forward. His presence was unmistakable. It was none other than Ethan Walker, a man whose face had been etched into the minds of many from his roles in films. Clad in simple dark jeans and a black t-shirt, his calm yet determined demeanor radiated authority, and there was no mistaking his resolve. Ethan's steps were purposeful as he approached the biker, his gaze unwavering. "Do you think this is right?" he asked, his voice cool but edged with steel. The biker turned toward him, his initial surprise quickly giving way to irritation. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he spat, trying to mask his unease with bravado. "Oh, look, it's Hollywood's favorite tough guy, here to give me a lesson on morality." Ethan didn't flinch. "This isn't about me," he said, his voice steady. "It's about what you're doing to them." He gestured toward Alex and Max, still huddled together in the corner, vulnerable but unbroken. The biker took a step back, his eyes narrowing. "They shouldn't even be here," he muttered. "People like them get in the way of the real world." Ethan shook his head slightly, his eyes never leaving the biker. "Hurting someone or something that can't defend itself doesn't make you strong," he said, his tone low but full of quiet conviction. "It only reveals who you really are." As the crowd grew around them, murmurs of agreement spread, and the biker's posture began to waver. The tension in the air was palpable, and it seemed like the standoff was coming to a head. But before the situation could escalate any further, Ethan took a step closer, his voice dropping lower as he addressed the biker. "What you're doing now isn't just wrong. It's dangerous. For you, for them, and for everyone else around you." The crowd grew still, waiting for the biker's next move. The biker stood frozen, his grip tightening on the handle of his leather jacket. His gaze locked onto Ethan with an intensity that was almost palpable, as if he were trying to gauge whether the actor was bluffing or whether he truly had the courage to challenge him. For a moment, the entire parking lot seemed suspended in time. The air was thick with tension as the crowd, now gathered in a loose circle, held their collective breath. It wasn't just a confrontation between two men anymore, it was a showdown. The social pressure from the onlookers was growing heavier by the second. And even though the biker's face was carved with anger, there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Doubt about whether this was truly worth it. The biker grunted, trying to regain some semblance of control. "You think you can intimidate me just 'cause you're some big shot actor?" he sneered, his voice thick with frustration. "You've got a name, but out here you're just another guy." Ethan didn't flinch, his eyes never leaving the biker's face. "I'm not trying to intimidate you," he said, his voice unwavering. "I'm just trying to stop you from making a mistake you'll regret." The biker's jaw clenched at Ethan's words. His knuckles were white as he gripped the motorcycle's handlebar, the bottle of whiskey still clenched tightly in his other hand. He wasn't used to being confronted like this. He was used to people avoiding him, staying out of his way, looking the other direction. But here, in this small parking lot, it felt different. For the first time in a long while, someone wasn't backing down. Someone was calling him out. And it unnerved him more than he cared to admit. "Regret?" the biker scoffed, looking over at Alex and Max, who were still huddled together on the ground, too scared to even move. "What do you know about regret? You've got it all: money, fame, respect. People like you don't know what it's like to be on the streets, fighting for every damn meal. You don't know what it's like to lose everything and still have to live with it." The words hit harder than he expected. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly, and for a moment, he didn't respond. The biker's anger was raw, and his words were laced with a deep, painful truth. Ethan could see it now. The biker wasn't just a bully. He wasn't just a man lashing out at the homeless for sport. No, the biker was projecting his own misery onto the world, trying to make everyone around him feel as small as he did. But Ethan wasn't about to back down. "Maybe I don't know what it's like to lose everything," Ethan said, his voice steady, "but I do know that taking out your pain on someone weaker than you doesn't fix anything. It just spreads the pain. It's not about them," he said, gesturing toward Alex and Max. "It's about you. About your anger and your pain. You don't have to keep it inside you. You don't have to spread it." The biker's face flushed a deep red, his fingers twitching at the bottle in his hand. Ethan could see the man struggling, his emotions a turbulent sea of anger, regret, and confusion. For a brief moment, it seemed like the biker was about to snap, to swing the bottle at Ethan, to prove that he wasn't intimidated by anyone, not even a movie star. But something in Ethan's voice, the calm authority that radiated from him, held the biker in place. He was trembling now, but it wasn't with the fury that had marked his earlier actions. No, it was something different, something more vulnerable. The crowd was silent, watching in anticipation. Phones were raised, capturing every second of this strange, unexpected confrontation. Everyone could sense that the situation was reaching its climax. Ethan had managed to chip away at the biker's walls, to make him question what he was about to do. "Look around you," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. "You're not the only one who's been through hell. But you're the only one here today trying to hurt someone else for no reason. People are watching you. You can walk away from this. You don't have to do this. You have a choice." The biker's breathing was heavy now, each breath coming in short, quick gasps. He glanced around at the growing crowd, feeling the eyes of dozens of people locked on him. For a moment, he looked unsure. His grip on the bottle loosened ever so slightly, and his eyes shifted from Ethan to Alex, who was still crouching down, clutching his dog close to him. Max, for his part, had stopped growling and was now looking at the biker with an almost eerie sense of calm. It was as if the dog could feel the weight of the moment too. It was a strange standoff, a man, a dog, and a crowd caught in the crossfire of one man's rage and another's refusal to back down. "You can't do this," Ethan said, his voice gentle but firm. "You can't hurt them. You have to stop." The biker's eyes flickered, his face contorting in frustration. For a second, it looked like he might explode. But instead, he let out a shaky laugh, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You think you can just walk in here and tell me what to do?" he spat, trying to regain control of the situation. But Ethan wasn't finished. "I'm not telling you what to do," he said. "I'm telling you what not to do. You don't want to be the guy who hurts the helpless just because you're too afraid to face your own pain. You don't want to be that guy." For the first time, the biker paused, his fists still clenched, but his posture wavering. His eyes darted back and forth between Ethan, the crowd, and Alex. It was as if something had shifted in him. Something had broken through the hardened layers of anger and bitterness. Then, in a move no one expected, he dropped the bottle. It hit the ground with a soft clink, the sound almost deafening in the sudden silence. His eyes were wide, and his breath came in ragged gasps as he turned away, his back to the crowd. "Yeah, well," the biker muttered, his voice hoarse. "I'm just tired of it all. You think it's easy?" His shoulders slumped, and he walked back toward his motorcycle. Without another word, he mounted the bike, started the engine, and sped off, leaving behind a stunned crowd and a peaceful, but still apprehensive, Alex and Max, as the biker disappeared into the distance. The tension in the air began to dissipate, leaving behind an eerie calm. People slowly began to disperse. But some stayed behind, quietly whispering to one another. Ethan stood still for a moment, watching the motorcycle fade into the distance. Then, he turned and knelt beside Alex and Max, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle. Alex, still holding Max tightly, nodded, his eyes filled with a mix of disbelief and gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I don't know what would have happened without you." Ethan smiled softly, pulling out a small card from his jacket pocket. "Take him to the vet," he said, offering it to Alex. "And if you need anything else, don't hesitate to reach out. I've got your back." Alex looked up at him, his face wet with tears, overwhelmed by the kindness. "Thank you," he said again, his voice thick with emotion. And as Ethan walked away, the crowd, which had once been tense with fear and anger, now found itself filled with a sense of quiet hope. Sometimes, all it takes is one person standing up to make a difference. The parking lot was quieter now, a sharp contrast to the earlier tension. The crowd had dispersed, leaving behind only the echoes of the heated confrontation. People exchanged quiet words as they walked away, their conversations muffled by the overwhelming silence that followed the bikers' departure. But despite the calm, the air still felt charged with the weight of what had just happened. Alex remained in his corner, still cradling Max close to him. The dog, now calm, lay his head in Alex's lap, his eyes scanning the space as if to ensure there were no more threats. But Alex didn't seem to notice. His mind was still processing the events that had just unfolded. He had barely spoken a word since Ethan had left, still trying to wrap his mind around the fact that someone had intervened in a way that changed everything. The shock of the encounter was starting to wear off, and Alex's thoughts drifted back to his life before Max, before any of this. He'd been just another face on the street, blending into the background, invisible to the world around him. The pain of losing his job, the endless days without shelter, the cold nights spent wandering from place to place, it had all built up over time. But the one thing he had never given up on was Max. The dog had been his lifeline, his reason to keep going even when everything else seemed lost. But now, something had shifted. There was a flicker of hope, a spark that hadn't been there before. The way Ethan had stood up to the biker, the way he'd spoken with such calm authority, made Alex believe for the first time in a long while that maybe, just maybe, there was still kindness left in the world. Maybe people still cared. Max nudged his hand, pulling him from his thoughts. Alex looked down at the dog, offering him a small smile. "We're okay, buddy," he whispered, as though trying to reassure both of them. Max wagged his tail, as if agreeing, but in the midst of the stillness, the world around them was beginning to change. The crowd that had gathered earlier was beginning to spread the story. Phones had captured every moment, and the footage was quickly making its way across social media. The scene of a Hollywood actor standing up to a biker in defense of a homeless man and his dog was too powerful to ignore. People were sharing the video, commenting on it, discussing it, and as the story spread, so did the ripple effect. The next day, Alex woke up to the sound of his phone buzzing. It was a strange occurrence, he hadn't heard from anyone in a long time. With trembling hands, he picked up the phone and unlocked it. Dozens of notifications flooded the screen. At first, he thought it was some kind of mistake. But then he saw the message from one of his old friends. Someone he hadn't spoken to in years. "Alex, I saw the video. I had no idea you were out there. Are you okay? Let me know what I can do to help." Alex's heart skipped a beat. People were reaching out. People who hadn't even bothered to look his way before. The video had touched something deep within them. Something that made them remember their own humanity. He opened the message and replied. His hands still shaking. I'm okay. Max and I are okay. Thank you. But as much as he wanted to believe that this was a sign that things were changing, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that the world still hadn't fully seen him. Still, he wasn't sure how to let anyone in. The years of being invisible, of living without connection, had built a wall around him, a wall he didn't know how to break down. Max, sensing his unease, gave a soft whine, nudging his hand again. Alex smiled and scratched behind his ears. I know, buddy, we've got each other. That's enough for now. But that wasn't all that was happening. Over in the heart of Los Angeles, the video was beginning to go viral. It wasn't just the people who had witnessed the confrontation who were moved, it was the entire city. The story spread like wildfire, and news outlets picked it up, broadcasting it to a much wider audience. People were talking about the kindness of a stranger, the courage it took for Ethan to stand up to the biker, and the reminder that compassion can come from unexpected places. Local charities began reaching out to Alex, offering support. Homeless shelters, veterinary clinics, and even restaurants offering free meals for Alex and Max, they all reached out. The power of the video had ignited a sense of community. And it wasn't just the people who saw it that were changed. It was also the people who were willing to step up and make a difference. But one phone call, in particular, would change Alex's life forever. It was late in the afternoon when Alex received a call from a number he didn't recognize. He hesitated for a moment, then answered. Hello, he asked, his voice unsure. Is this Alex? A calm, professional voice asked from the other end. I saw your story. I'm Dr. Harris from the downtown animal clinic. We've been following what happened with you and Max. I just wanted to let you know that we're offering you both a full checkup and any treatment Max might need. No charge, of course. Alex blinked, not sure if he was hearing correctly. Wait, you're offering us free care for Max? Yes, the doctor confirmed. We saw the video, and we wanted to help. Max is clearly a very special dog, and we want to make sure he stays healthy. Tears welled up in Alex's eyes as he struggled to find the words. Thank you. I don't know what to say. This means the world to us. Don't mention it, Dr. Harris said kindly. We're just glad to help. Bring him by whenever you're ready. As Alex hung up the phone, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, hope. It wasn't just a fleeting feeling, it was a deep, abiding sense of possibility. Things were changing, slowly, but surely. The world around him was starting to see him. And in that moment, Alex knew that maybe he wasn't as invisible as he once thought. Max, sensing his owner's mood shift, nudged him again, this time with more insistence. Alex laughed softly, wiping away a tear as he bent down to hug his dog. I know, buddy, we're gonna be okay. And so, with the kindness of strangers, the support of a community, and the unwavering love of a dog, Alex and Max began to move forward, one small step at a time. The days following the phone call from Dr. Harris felt like a whirlwind of change. Alex had never imagined his life could turn around so quickly. What had once been a world of loneliness and struggle now held the promise of something new, hope. Max's visit to the animal clinic was the first sign that things were indeed shifting. When they arrived, Dr. Harris greeted them with a warm smile. And the clinic staff treated Max like a celebrity. His checkup revealed that, despite his rough life on the streets, he was in surprisingly good health. Alex sat by, silently wiping away tears of relief, overwhelmed by the kindness and care that was being offered without judgment or question. But it wasn't just Max who was being taken care of. As Alex's story continued to spread, he began receiving messages and offers from people and organizations across the city. Some offered help with finding shelter. Others gave him information about job opportunities, while a few reached out with just a simple, heartfelt note, "You're not alone." The kindness was overwhelming. Alex, who had spent years feeling invisible, suddenly felt seen, not just by the people he had interacted with, but by the world. He couldn't help but think of the day when everything changed, the day Ethan Walker had stepped into that parking lot and spoken up, giving Alex and Max a chance when they'd been at their most vulnerable. Ethan hadn't just saved them from the biker, he had given them back a sense of self-worth. As the weeks passed, Alex began taking small steps toward rebuilding his life. He found a temporary place to stay through one of the shelters that had reached out to him. It wasn't much, just a small room in a shared facility, but it was a start. Max had a safe place to sleep. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Alex didn't have to worry about where they would go next. But even more important than the roof over their heads was the shift in Alex's mindset. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to dream again. Maybe, just maybe, he could find work. Maybe he could build a future. A life where he wasn't defined by the hardships he had endured. One afternoon, Alex sat in a small cafe near his new place, sipping coffee as he looked over some job listings on his phone. He was still unsure of what he wanted to do, but he knew he had to start somewhere. As he scrolled, he felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned around, expecting to see a stranger or a passerby. But instead, he was greeted by a familiar face. It was Ethan. "Hey," Ethan said with a warm smile, pulling out a chair to sit down. "I was hoping to catch up with you." Alex blinked, still in disbelief. He had never imagined this moment. The man who had stepped in to change his life was now sitting across from him, as if they were equals. "Ethan, what are you? How did you know where to find me?" Ethan chuckled softly. "You're not as hard to find as you think," he said. "I've been checking in on you from time to time. I wanted to make sure you were doing all right." Alex looked down at his coffee cup, the weight of the moment sinking in. "I don't know how to thank you," he said quietly. "You did more than just stop that guy. You changed my life. You gave me hope when I had none." Ethan reached across the table and placed a hand on Alex's. "You don't have to thank me," he said, his tone sincere. "I just did what anyone should have done. The real change, Alex, is you. You are doing the work. You are taking control of your life again. I just gave you a little push." Tears welled up in Alex's eyes as he looked at Ethan, not knowing how to express the depth of his gratitude. "But I never thought I'd get here. I never thought anyone would care." Ethan smiled warmly. "The world's not as cold as it seems, Alex. There are good people everywhere. Sometimes, they just need a little reminder to show up." Alex wiped his eyes and nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. The feelings of invisibility, of being forgotten, were slipping away. He wasn't just a man on the street anymore. He was Alex, a person with potential, with hope, and a future. "So," Ethan said, changing the subject, "what's next for you? Any ideas yet?" Alex paused, looking out the window at the bustling street outside. For the first time, he didn't feel paralyzed by fear or doubt. He didn't have all the answers. But he knew one thing for certain: he wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time in years, he felt ready to take that next step. "I'm thinking about going back to school," Alex said, a smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe learn some new skills. Find something I'm passionate about. I don't know exactly what. But it's a start." Ethan nodded in approval. That sounds like a great plan. Just take it one step at a time. And remember, you're not alone in this. As the conversation drifted to lighter topics, the feeling of warmth and hope that filled the cafe seemed to permeate through Alex. He was no longer the invisible man he had once been. He was a man with a future, with a story of struggle and resilience, and with people who cared. After spending the afternoon catching up, Ethan got up to leave. But before he walked away, he turned back to Alex with a grin. "You've got this," he said, "and if you ever need anything, you know where to find me." As Ethan left, Alex looked out the window once more, this time with a sense of determination. The world was still full of challenges, but now he had the strength to face them. He had Max by his side, and he had the support of people who cared. And for the first time in a long time, Alex felt that he was exactly where he was meant to be, a man with a second chance, ready to build the life he had always dreamed of.